And that's how our government solves our problems.
Go ahead, your chance.
It's interesting that you bring up the issue of transportation, because I think one of the best examples of what I see as good government that's happened in the recent past is the Transportation Finance Committee report, which did an analysis of exactly what you're talking about, as well as the other transportation finance needs that we have here in the state. And frankly, that was not at all what I saw in that report. If there were simple solutions, I would have thought that bipartisan committee, a very well-informed, very well-educated committee, I may add, would have come up with this type of comment. The reality is what they came up with is a bunch of recommendations that are probably going to take us in the right direction. None of them are easy. I've recently been on the MAPC Legislative Committee where a lot of these recommendations were discussed at length, and the possibility of moving some of these reforms forward, including a better approach to procurement at the state level of state highway projects. And I believe that probably is moving forward through the State House. That is something I very much think needs to be done. But I think to oversimplify and say that someone has not been doing their job properly, and to imply that if we just did the job properly, the problems would be solved, I think that is a gross oversimplification of what's going on.
Could I just respond
Nope, not
very
right now.
quickly?
Nope.
We got to have some reason for being here.
All right. It's too bad we can't get any substantive debate going on.
Yeah, right.
Go ahead, Jim.
This is really a follow. I think Carolyn almost started the question, but I mean, I'm a simple guy. I've got property taxes, and I love the idea of more local aid coming back to me. Where's it going to come from? What would you specifically cut? And this follows on what Tom was saying. What would you cut so my town can get the local aid, so my property taxes can go down?
Well, I'm going to answer your question because you're insisting on this word cut, and I will answer that question because Carolyn jumped on me for moving to reforms. The governor, every time he steps to a podium, gives away $1 billion. We just allocated $1 billion for biotech firms, for life sciences companies in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Life sciences companies come to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts already. We have the human capital to attract them. We do attract them. Of course, they say, thank you very much for that $1 billion. We're going to make you the governor of the year. I would do that too if someone gave me $1 billion. However, in a situation where cities and towns are hurting, our transportation infrastructure is crumbling, perhaps there are better uses for that $1 billion. But I'm going to keep going because the notion that the only way you can solve the state's fiscal problems is to take a hatchet to various things that are important to people, I think is a false premise. During the last election cycle, both gubernatorial candidates agreed that a way to save hundreds of millions of dollars at the local level, hundreds of millions, would be to enact what's called municipal GIC. And this is a hard thing to explain, people's eyes glaze, but basically what it means is the state buys its insurance for its employees through a big pool because there's so many employees. They get a better rate than cities and towns, which buy for themselves, for their employees, gets by a good deal. You know, you have a bigger pool, you get a better rate. The estimates ran to the hundreds of millions of dollars from both candidates that if you just allowed cities and towns to opt to vote, to buy their insurance from the same pool as the state, you'd literally save cities and towns hundreds of millions of dollars. Governor Patrick came into office and he enacted municipal GIC, but he added a little kicker. And that little kicker gives municipal unions an absolute veto over a town's decision to join the municipal GIC, which means no cities and towns will join the municipal GIC. Those hundreds of millions of dollars are not saved.
Jim, do you want to direct that as well? Same question, because there's a different view from Ms. Dykema with regard to the cuts that we're talking about.
Yeah, I'd like to go to Carolyn, but and also continue the theme of the GICs, which was meant as a solution originally. Now, what do we do? What do we do with health care? That would have been, were it not for the union provision, a great way to deal with the biggest budget buster in every municipal government, which is health care. Now, what do we do?
I guess a comment on, and I've talked to a number of local officials about this healthcare issue at the local level, and my understanding is that a lot of municipalities have taken steps apart from the GIC to address this issue. I know Holliston is participating in a consortium, a healthcare consortium at the local level, and we actually have seen increases in healthcare spending at significantly lower rates than your average municipality in the state. So that is, something that at the local level is already being done. The GIC issue is a good one. I think it's a good one that Dan's raised. My understanding of that issue is that we've got local unions that have bargained in good faith over the years, and their concern was that bargaining piece of the bargaining would be removed from their control. I think clearly from a municipality standpoint, we need to get control of those costs. We put in place the GIC provision. The first year that it was implemented, I believe towns had less than 2 months, I think, to sign on to that provision. I've actually spoken with some teachers about this very issue, and the sense is, you know what? We're getting there. Give us more time. You gave us very little time to begin with to make this very important decision that's going to have impacts that are going to last for years to come. Work with us and try and get there, because we all understand that healthcare is taking dollars out of the classroom and is an area we need to address. I'd as soon do it as a collaborative agreement among parties that are working in good faith, rather than come down and require municipalities to make these decisions without giving it fair time to work out on its own.
Let's stay on education, if we could. And my eyes were glazing over with the acronyms, but we are moving on to
General Insurance Commission.
a very simple but tough question. You're both from Holliston, and I have a story in front of me from the Metro West Daily News, and it is this is wrong 6 ways to Sunday here. This is about the school buses. And Carolyn, I want your response first. I'm going to deputize both of you as superintendent of schools there. For the audience who's not aware of this, parents were told to sign up for the buses, and they were going to pay a user fee. Apparently not enough of them signed up because they didn't want to pay the fee. They decided they'd drive their kids to school. So now we have thousands of vehicles descending on the school. How green is that? Not very. But here's the question. You come to work the next day, you've got to solve this problem. You've either got to cut the buses, you've got to mandate busing, and we know how well that has worked in the past. What's your first step? How do you solve this, Carol?
Well, I think this is a good example of what communities are facing these days, and there is no easy answer to this. There are going to be people that have a hard time either way. It was either support the override, which would have included busing in the school budget. I personally believe that something like busing should be included in the, I believe that's a core school service and something we shouldn't be feed for, just like sports and music and all those other programs that rightfully belong in our public school system to educate our children. Tough decisions are having to be made right now because of the fiscal situation we're in. The challenge as a representative is to deal with the long-term issues, to make sure that the funds are there in the future, do what we can now for the future. In the short term, I don't know. I've got 3 kids in the Holliston school system. I feel lucky and frankly a little bit guilty that we're outside of the 2-mile limit. My children are young enough so that we won't be paying any fees this year. I think that's an inequity right there. I think we need to make do. The voters have spoken. The override didn't pass. I think we need to work closely with
But if you had your
safety.
druthers, you would make this a core service. That's what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely.
And I want to hear Dan's response, but a quick comment for you. What about those people you talked about at the outset here? Those people on fixed incomes, people a little older, who are saying to you, I can't afford these property taxes. When you make busing a core service, inevitably your tax bill will go up.
The people on fixed incomes that I have spoken with are almost always big supporters of education. They know it's important to invest in education, and I think if they saw a light at the end of the tunnel, if they didn't see this never-ending stream of property taxes to fund schools, they might be willing to say, you know what, in the short term, we're willing to take on a little more if we know in the long term there's a long-term solution.
Dan?
With all due respect, I'm not going to answer your question, and I'm not going to do it because it assumes the premise that this is a situation that is inevitable, and we have to. The school superintendent has to choose between school buses and being green and everything else.